Did you know there once existed an empire so powerful it ruled nearly half of the world's population, only to vanish from humanity's memory? Today, we journey into one of the greatest and most enigmatic superpowers in history, the Persian Empire. Join Logic Relic as we travel back thousands of years to uncover legendary battles, hidden secrets, radiant glory, and the destined rise and fall of a civilization that once made the entire world look up in awe. Chapter 1. Discovering Ancient Persia and the Origins of Knowledge. Most people don't have much knowledge about ancient Persia. In fact, our perceptions often come more from cinema or popular culture than from school lessons. When it comes to history, people often talk a lot about Rome, Greece, or Egypt, civilizations that receive endless attention. But in the East, what happened? This part of history is often overlooked, even though ancient Persia was once the most powerful empire in the world. At its peak, nearly half the global population lived under the rule of the Persian kings. That's why, let's look back over many centuries to learn more about this land, going beyond the few things that textbooks usually mention. So, where does our knowledge of the Persians come from? Mainly from three Greek historians, Herodotus, Xenophon, and Ctesias. However, there's a hitch. The Greeks were rivals of Persia and never truly understood their culture. Therefore, many records are biased or inaccurate. Even the names of Persian kings that we know today have been filtered through the Greek lens and are far from the originals. The Greek alphabet didn't have enough characters to represent Persian sounds. For example, Cyrus was actually Kurish, Darius was Daryava, and Xerxes was Xyarsha. Additionally, they weren't kings in the Greek concept, but shahs. Fortunately, besides the Greek texts, we have other more reliable sources. One of them is the Royal Archive at Persepolis, which preserves thousands of clay tablets written in cuneiform. These economic records have given us a clearer picture of how the Persian Empire actually operated. The Persians, also called Parsa, belonged to the Indo-Iranian group and were closely related to the Medes. They migrated from the lands now known as Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia at the end of the Bronze Age. The name they used for themselves was Aryana, a word that still lives on in the name Iran today. Interestingly, the word Perse in their language means warrior or strong man. At that time, the Persians lived a nomadic herding life, but not the kind of roaming across the steppes, but vertical nomadism. They moved seasonally, in summer to the highland valleys, in winter to the lower foothills, where the pastures were greener. This lifestyle still exists in a few places in the Caucasus region today. The ancient Persians lived simply and austerely, with frugal diets, rarely drinking alcohol, and were famous as outstanding horsemen. Unlike the inhabitants of Mesopotamia, they wore long pants, convenient for horseback riding, and distinctive pointed hats called tiara. Physically, they also stood out, taller, fairer-skinned compared to the native inhabitants of the Fertile Crescent. By the 7th century BCE, the Persians had conquered Anshan, the city of the Elamites. From then on, every Persian king began their title with the epithet, King of Anshan. Chapter 2. The Rise of Cyrus the Great and the Empire's Expansion. In the 6th century BCE, an outstanding figure stepped onto the stage of history, Cyrus II, who was later exalted as Cyrus the Great. At that time, the Persians were still vassals under the control of the Median Empire, but Cyrus initiated a revolt against the Median king Astyages. Some powerful tribes within the Medes, dissatisfied with Astyages' rule, turned to support Cyrus. With this backing, he crushed the Median army in the decisive battle, forcing Astyages to suffer a humiliating defeat. After the victory, Cyrus built the city of Pasargadae, which became the first capital of the rising Persian Empire. But Cyrus didn't stop there. He launched successive military campaigns, conquering Parthia, Armenia, Cappadocia, Elam, Lydia, and Ionia. Some regions like Hyrcania and Cilicia voluntarily submitted. As a result, Cyrus quickly controlled most of the vast area in Western Asia. His next target was the superpower Neo-Babylonia, the ruling center of Mesopotamia. Legend has it that the Babylonian king Nabonidus had angered the patron god Marduk. Marduk was said to have transferred his favor to Cyrus, calling on him to liberate Babylon. In reality, when the Persian army approached the city, the Babylonian nobility, dissatisfied with Nabonidus, opened the gates and surrendered, welcoming Cyrus as a savior. This victory showed that Cyrus was not only an outstanding military leader, but also a shrewd politician. He ruled with rare tolerance for that era. As long as the peoples did not resist fiercely, they would enjoy considerable autonomy. Defeated kings were often not executed, but given important positions in the empire's machinery. Cyrus usually limited interference in the internal affairs of conquered lands. Many local officials continued in their roles, thereby minimizing resentment and preventing uprisings. He was also famous for freeing exiled peoples, including the Jews, allowing them to return home and supporting the rebuilding of the Jerusalem temple. This is why Cyrus is mentioned with respect in the Bible. In fact, the Persians only made up a very small portion of the empire's total subjects, about 1/20th of the population. Therefore, maintaining power could not rely solely on force. Cyrus innovated a model of governance based on tolerance, cooperation, and self-governance. After consolidating Babylon, Cyrus turned to defending the northern borders against pressure from the Scythian tribes. However, this expedition turned into tragedy. In a fierce battle with the Massagetæ led by Queen Tomarus, the Persian army suffered heavy losses, and Cyrus himself fell in battle. After his death, the throne passed to his son Cambyses. Chapter 3: The Era of Cambyses and Darius, Reforms and Expansion. Right after Cyrus's death, many of the lands he had conquered rose up in rebellion. Cambyses, Cyrus's son, spent the early years of his reign suppressing and restoring order. Once the situation stabilized, he directed his ambitions westward and launched an expedition to Egypt. Cambyses captured Memphis, took the pharaoh prisoner, and placed both Egypt and Libya under Persian control. He also dreamed of advancing to Carthage and Kush, but both plans failed. The Kush campaign collapsed due to lack of supplies, and the Carthage expedition was cancelled because the Phoenician fleet, the naval force he relied on, refused to fight their fellow kin. Meanwhile, Babylon rebelled again. On the way back to quell the uprising, Cambyses suddenly fell ill and died. The throne should have gone to his brother Smerdis, but a noble named Darius inserted himself into the power arena. Darius claimed that the person impersonating Smerdis was actually a magus named Galmada, and the real Smerdis had been killed by Cambyses earlier. Based on this accusation, Darius seized the throne. Since he was not a direct descendant of Cyrus, he legitimized his power by asserting descent from Achaemenes, Cyrus's ancestor. From here, the Persian royal family was called the Achaemenid dynasty. Like Cambyses, Darius first had to suppress a series of scattered uprisings across the territory. He conducted a failed campaign against the Scythians north of the Black Sea, annexed Thrace, established alliances with Macedonia, and began long-term conflicts with the Greeks. However, Darius was not distinguished as a general, especially since he rarely led troops personally, but is remembered as a great administrator. He left his mark with administrative and organizational reforms, turning the Persian Empire into one of the most advanced states in the ancient world. To efficiently manage a vast territory, Darius divided the country into provinces called satrapies, each governed by a satrap. The satrap was responsible for infrastructure, roads, military depots, tax collection, and administering justice. Initially, they also commanded local troops, but after several satrap-led rebellions, Darius stripped them of military authority and placed the soldiers under direct central court control. Darius issued standardized coinage, the gold daric, worth 20 silver siglos. Although coin minting originated in Lydia, it was under Darius that coins became a common medium of exchange throughout the empire. A Persian soldier's monthly pay was equivalent to 1 daric. For comparison, a sheep cost about 3 siglos, a sack of wheat about 2. Darius built a network of paved roads across the empire, aiding both rapid army mobility and promoting trade. The most prominent was the Royal Road, connecting the Aegean coast of Lydia to Susa. On this road network, he also established a relay station system for communication. Thus, messages could travel across the empire in just a few days, passed from one rider to another. Darius also oversaw the digging of the first version of the Suez Canal, connecting the Red Sea to a branch of the Nile River, opening sea trade routes between the two seas. At the same time, he transformed Persepolis into a magnificent ceremonial capital alongside other major centers like Pasargadae, Ecbatana, Susa, and Babylon. Persepolis became the cultural-political heart of the empire, with monumental structures like the Apadana, a gigantic audience hall. Artisans from all regions came here, creating magnificent sculptures and monuments. Just outside the city, the Persians established lush gardens called paradisa, a word that later became the root of paradise in many languages. Chapter 4. The Army, Religion, and Wars with Greece. The pillar of the Persian army was the Immortals Force, an elite unit of 10,000 professional heavy infantry, always armored, carrying spears, swords, and bows. Notably, their numbers never changed. Any warrior who died, retired, or was injured was immediately replaced. There is a hypothesis that the name Immortals is a mistranslation from Persian, which meant companions, but thanks to Herodotus, the name entered the history books. Besides the Immortals, the Persian army included light infantry with archers, heavy cavalry with lances, and light cavalry with javelins. Depending on the theater of war, they mobilized auxiliary troops from across the empire: Egypt, Babylon, Assyria, Judea, Greece. Additionally, mercenaries, especially Greeks and Scythians, were an important component. The Persians are often called fire worshippers, but in reality, they did not worship fire, but followed an early form of Zoroastrianism, also called Mazda worship. This was not yet absolute monotheism. They recognized many gods but elevated Ahura Mazda above all. Alongside that were gods like Mitra, light and truth, Ahriman, evil god, Anahita, goddess of fertility. Zoroastrianism was mainly prevalent among the Persian and Median nobility. However, the Persians did not impose their beliefs on other peoples. In the empire, gods like Marduk, Babylon, Yahweh, Judea, Ammonius, Egypt, Zeus, Greece, were all recognized. This policy of tolerance helped solidify stability. An interesting custom in Persian culture was discussing important decisions while drunk. People believed that alcohol made humans speak the truth. The next day, they reviewed it while sober. If it still made sense, the decision was approved. If not, they started the process over. The conflict erupted from the Ionian revolt of the Greek city-states in 499 BCE. Backed by Athens and some Aegean islands, the Ionians not only resisted Persian rule, but also attacked Sardis, the Lydian capital, burning the city and the temple of Anahita. After 7 years, the revolt was finally suppressed. To reassert authority, Persia sent envoys to the Greek city-states, demanding earth and water, symbols of submission. Many places accepted, but Athens and Sparta did not. In Sparta, the envoys were thrown into a well. In Athens, they were executed. This enraged the Persians and prompted preparations for a punitive expedition. In 490 BCE, Persian forces landed on the plain of Marathon near Athens. Though twice as numerous as the enemy, they were at a disadvantage because they had to attack uphill. Commander Artaphernes hesitated, but Greek General Miltiades seized the moment. As the Persians prepared to withdraw to surprise Athens from the sea, he launched a surprise attack. The Persians panicked, losing up to 7,000 men and many warships, while Athens lost only about 150 soldiers. Darius was determined for revenge, but an uprising in Egypt distracted him, and he died before implementing the plan. His successor Xerxes mobilized a massive army, modern estimates around 200,000, and advanced into Greece by land. The Greeks chose to resist at Thermopylae, a narrow pass. Contrary to the legend of 300 Spartans, in reality, there were several thousand soldiers from various city-states participating. After 2 days of resistance, most Greek forces withdrew, leaving about 500 men, including 300 Spartan warriors, to fight to the last man. The Persians then captured Athens, but the city had been evacuated. The Athenian navy and allies concentrated at Salamis. Here, the Greeks used tactics to lure the Persian fleet into the narrow strait, depriving them of maneuverability. Greek triremes charged in, shattering the Persian fleet. Without supply lines, the Persian army retreated in chaos, ultimately accepting a peace treaty, abandoning all the Aegean islands and the Anatolian coast. Despite the defeat, Persia did not abandon its intentions. They shifted from military conquest to political and cultural influence, using gold to manipulate. Even many famous Greek figures, like the orator Demosthenes, received money from Persia to support policies favorable to them. Chapter 5. The Fall of the Empire and its Legacy. What led to the final catastrophe for Persia did not come from classical Greece, but from a much more unexpected enemy. In the 4th century BCE, Philip II of Macedon had unified all of Greece under his rule. With that power, he nurtured a long-standing plan to invade the Persian Empire. However, before he could set out, Philip was suddenly assassinated by his own bodyguard, Pausanias. The true motive behind this assassination remains a mystery. Some say Pausanias had a personal grudge. There are hypotheses that the Persians were behind it, and even rumors that his son, Alexander, might have been involved. The truth will likely remain buried forever. Whatever the case, after Philip's death, the throne fell to Alexander, who was only 18 at the time. He inherited the entire prepared invasion plan and wasted no time in making it a reality. In just 13 short years, Alexander launched lightning campaigns, sweeping away the entire Achaemenid Empire without suffering a single military defeat. The Persian army could find no way to counter the Macedonian phalanx formation, a revolutionary tactic of the time, nor resist Alexander's military genius and bold recklessness. Many times he charged directly into the thick of battle, and almost always emerged with only minor wounds. By 329 BCE, after more than 2 centuries of existence, the Achaemenid Empire, once the world's greatest power, officially collapsed. The Hellenistic era began, with profound influences across the Middle East. However, Persia's legacy did not disappear. It continued to live on in successor states and dynasties. The Seleucid Empire with Hellenized colors, the Parthian Kingdom, then the mighty Sassanid dynasty. Even today, the Persian language is still widely used. And despite the long dominance of Islam in modern Iran, there are still small communities continuing to maintain their ancestors' ancient faith, Zoroastrianism, as proof that the Persian legacy has never truly vanished. So, we have journeyed together through the ups and downs of the Persian Empire, from its birth, rise, might, to its fall, and the legacy that still echoes to this day. Thank you for joining Logic Relic on this epic historical exploration. If you found the video interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to give us more motivation to continue bringing many other captivating stories. Follow along so you don't miss the next episodes, where we will continue to unlock the mysteries of human history. See you in the new journeys.